Hey, Sonhara.
Hey, Raney.
So, a lot of people are really excited about our project.
Yay.
And I know, right? So, let's tell them a little bit about it. What was your inspiration for Black Girl's Guide to Fertility?
It came about with me going and dealing with infertility and feeling when I first started that I was the only Black person in the room. And then as time went on, I started seeing more Black women, but we weren't talking about it. And so I just felt like I didn't have an outlet. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And then when I told people I was going to talk about it, they're like, no, you can't talk about it because you don't have success yet. You don't have a child, so don't talk about it. And then I did anyway. So part of I feel like my goal and my mission is to get this out there so that we can get people to really start a conversation and to get rid of the silence. Because I feel like that's what's hurting women the most when you're dealing with infertility, because you have no one to talk to.
That's really interesting. You said people didn't want you to talk about it because you hadn't had success yet.
And because they said it's a private matter, that you're not supposed to be talking about it.
And were these other women that were dealing with the same type of issue? Or
Some women, some people from church, and I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus. And I think that sometimes people will say things because they think that they are protecting you in some sense, but it isn't really a way of protection because there's no better way to help people than to get a story out that can reach them and that they can identify with, to normalize infertility.
Right. Normalizing is so important for this and many other things. So, okay, you decided to come public despite the fact that a lot of people were giving you pushback. What was your experience with telling your story?
So immediately when I started, well, let me backtrack first because I live between Atlanta and LA. And so I had a manager in LA. And so 2 summers ago, like I brought this web series to her and I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do. Can we shop this around? And she was like, well, who would want this? And so I said, people who are dealing with infertility.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter that you are Black or whatever your race is. If you can identify with a story, then it's a story. Even though I'm targeting Black women so that we will come out of the shadows and talk about it, it's still a story. But she was like, well, I don't see who would want this. And so she never even pitched it at all. And so my dad was like, I don't care what that lady says, like, you know, you need to keep pursuing this. Like, this is something that is going to help people. So that's when I decided I was going to do it on my own. And so as soon as I started putting the podcast out there, as soon as I started prepping for the web series, I got tons of messages from people through social media, women, Black women, even some Black men who were just like, oh my God, like you don't know what this has done for me. You don't know what you talking about it. I can identify with every single thing that you're saying. And on top of that, they hadn't told anyone in their family. So it was like everything that I was talking about, everything I've been talking about for the past 6 years with the silence of infertility, it's like people who are going through it automatically identified and was like, thank you for talking. Thank you for coming forward. I may tell someone my story, you know, and to me, that's what it's about.
Wow. So you mentioned that you had representation in LA and New York. Why did you decide to shoot this here instead?
Because I feel like I consider Atlanta my permanent home.
Okay.
And I feel like there was so much character here, even though we didn't delve into it with the first 2 episodes. Like I see Atlanta as a character. And because there's so much production here, a lot of it is shot on stages. And sometimes I feel like the city itself gets cheated out of the character. Like if you ever watched Sex and the City, like New York City is a character in the show.
Right.
You know, and so that's where I want to go with this web series. Like I really want to showcase Atlanta as a character because there's so much to be shown. There's so much to tell that's really going to add to the story.
Right. Well, as an Atlanta native, I can appreciate that. So you talked about how you wanted to approach this and why you decided to do it. But let's talk a little bit more about the characters now.
Okay.
So Ava, my character, has a stepson.
Yes.
What made you decide to give her a child, particularly a stepchild, in this project?
I just saw it as another obstacle. And I think about my own personal life. My husband has 3 adult sons. And so I started thinking about, oh my God, like what if one of his kids were small? Like how would I deal with that? You know, how would the interaction be between, you know, their mothers, or what would that be like? And of course I have friends who have children, and sometimes our relationship between stepmom and the actual mother of that child isn't so good. And so how does that play out for Ava when she is actually doing everything right, and she's mothering her stepson, but she's really, I mean, she still isn't a mother in real life. So how does that add to the dynamics of her character? And so that's why I gave her a stepson, just to kind of throw another obstacle in her way and to see how she deals with it.
Okay. And do you feel like there are any challenges because of having a stepson that Ava faces with Mike, her husband? Or just any other challenges that she has with Mike that you can share?
Definitely. I feel like she feels left out of the equation a lot. And I've seen that time and time again with people in their relationships. Although it's not something that's intentional, like that person feels left out because like, okay, well, you have a child. I don't have a child. And I know you're including me in this family unit. But then again, it really is kind of like you and him. When you guys go to the parent-teacher conferences, it's you and him. When you go to the games, it's like you and him. You know, and what if, you know, Zion says to Mike, hey, can we go do something together, just me and you? Not because he doesn't love Ava, but that's his father. He has the right to do something with his father by himself. You know, so how do those things impact Ava? Is that hurtful to her? You know, how does she cope? How does she deal with it? So it's all things that, you know, build to her character.
You said you've received a lot of feedback from a lot of women facing those problems. How do you feel how does that make you feel, and what impact do you hope to have on the community?
It made me feel really good because at first I was nervous because, you know, and you're listening to things people have said to you, don't talk about it, don't share your story, you know. And even when I shared my story with my family, it wasn't me, my husband told my family, and I was pissed. I was like,
really?
You don't have the right to tell them. And it was at a funeral nonetheless. And he told my family, you know, what was going on. I'm like, you don't have the right to tell them what's going on. Like, talk about your own situation. Like, you don't have the right to tell them. And so just me going through this process, and then when I put out the podcast, I remember I shut my computer down. I'm like, I'm not even going to look to see what people's responses were. And he called me that night and was like, hey, you need to open your computer up. Because he always looks at my social media. He was like, you need to open up your computer because you have so many people who are messaging you, who are responding to what you're saying. And so that night, I remember I stayed up till like 3 o'clock in the morning just writing people back. And you could just sense the sadness and hopelessness in some people's emails. Like, hey, I don't have anyone to talk to. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm going through. Do you have any advice? So for me, it was like, you know, kind of giving people what I didn't have. I didn't have an outlet. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And so I feel good about that. And again, my goal out of all this is to start a conversation so that women, and of course men too, because men deal with infertility, that we don't have to be alone and deal with it by ourselves.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering all of those wonderful questions.
Thank you, Raney.